a little bit about who I am and what this topic is. I know Ralph's doing the talk on active defense as well. The VP is around here somewhere, so his head must be exploding because active defense is a topic he's got a good bit of flag on. But anyway, so I wanted to talk about what we consider losing battles, winning wars, and the topic of active defense, but primarily from the perspective that it comes from 6 months worth of research into threat intelligence. What my team does, and just an overview of kind of what I do with my core divisions does, our Optiv is the combination of Fishnet and ArchCon. Been around officially as a company since July. Both companies before that have been around a long time. Everything we call Solutions R&D inside the office of CISO, and I'm responsible for a small team that develops program level security guidance. I hope that makes sense to you. So it's not, we're responsible for developing the strategy and the operational guidance and building maturity models along the program level things that you all implement, whether it's inside a threat program, an AppSec program, threat intelligence program, a cloud security program, an incident response program, all these things that are program ties. We make up words all the time. It's fun. Try it. The strategy and stuff comes from my team. So if you ever want to participate in any of these topics, again, find me. And so I'll kind of roll this off. One kind of note real quick. I really much prefer if you guys actually do, talk back rather than just sit and listen. It's nice to listen to, but I really kind of want to hear what you think, what you say. If you have thoughts and comments and concerns, by all means, shout them out. Raise your hand, and we'll talk about it. So, real quick, the way I'm constructing this is a background perspective, understanding what winning and losing is, or winning and failing is, and what playing defense and evolving game means to me and what I discovered. So I did spend about 6 months researching popular threat intelligence from a program perspective. So this is a knowledge-based approach based on some research. It's leading practices, not best practices, because there's no such thing. And we basically studied world-class and then not so world-class organizations. We drew from a bunch of industry experts, leading minds. For our threat intelligence research, Ralph is part of that, Chris O'Leary is part of that. Your mileage may vary. This is not a silver bullet. They're probably no werewolves, so it wouldn't work anyway. The primary research methodology that we use to develop our research comes from basically 3 pieces of this. We take people that are actual industry experts, not experts, but experts, that have actual seat times and know what they're talking about, respected. We take their opinions, we figure out where the intersections are, where the common denominators are. We then spend time with companies and focus groups like what I mentioned earlier to understand hopes and dreams, failures, successes, what you try to achieve, what you'd like to achieve, what you think you're achieving, and what you're actually achieving, and then talking to solution providers, because up until we get vendors and solution providers involved, you're all just chiseling by hand, and that's painful. So let's talk about understanding winning and losing. I'll start off by saying security is hard. I think everybody agrees. So if security is hard, widgets really aren't helping. Does anybody disagree with that statement? Right? And this is not a hate on vendors. This is the fact that so many security programs are based off of, and I know I studied probably one of the more widget-laden security things. When you say threat intelligence, don't shout it out loud. There's plenty of vendors that come to mind first, right? And especially at the executive level. So widgets really aren't helping us do our jobs better. It's actually not the widget's fault, it's the way we use them. And so we're generally really bad at security. I think that's universally true, primarily because every company that thinks they have fantastic security has put it in their security policies, talked about it on Wall Street, subsequently becomes the topic of the biggest breach ever in the history of ever. And it's not that we don't try, but I just don't think we're very good at it as a discipline. So I think there's an over-focus on all the advanced cool stuff that we could do, right? Everybody is focusing on the next big hack of the next cool thing, like we're car hacking, which is great, but most of you don't know what all the IP addresses on your network do. So we fail miserably at the basics. That wasn't actually meant to be funny, but it is. So, right, but it's true. Tell me it's not true. Somebody tell me it's not true. They know everything on the network. Anybody? Yeah, your whole network. I tell you what, if you have a family and kids, probably not, right? Because I checked. I've got a thing. I follow Marcus Green School of Security. I've got a script that's written on my network. My box gets out, and every time a new IP address gets assigned to a new MAC address, I get an alert on my phone. The other day, I was in a different city. I was not on my network issued an IP address to a MAC address I had never seen. I about lost my mind. Oh, I said, it's okay, I gave the new nanny our Wi-Fi password. It's okay. She has to have access to the internal scheduling system that we use, so it's fair. So we stay at basics, but we're awesome at all the tools and stuff that we built 10 layers above it. This reminds me of anybody Monty Python fans? Reminds me of that scene in Monty Python, the Holy Grail, we talked about the sand, the castle that we built on top of the sand. So, how is your visibility, speaking of which? How well can you see? Anybody feel comfortable saying that they have a good visibility of their network, their infrastructure, their tools, their people? People? Probably not. So you can't stop what you can't see. This is why there's a sudden rush of visibility tools being sold to your security executives. Right? When we talk about threat intelligence, everybody instantly thinks of more data, more feeds, blacklisted IP addresses, bad domains, MD5 hashes. That's fantastic. Where do you put that? We'll talk about that. So you can't stop what you can't see or that you can't even understand. And I'm just going to leave you with a brief slide that you've all seen before several times and pause to reflect on how awesome security is. So what does it mean to fail? Anybody? Sorry? Okay. That you learn from failures. I like that one. That's a unique one. So what does it mean to fail, guys? Anybody, from a security perspective, if you're an enterprise defender, what does it mean to fail? Sorry? You did not meet your objective. I like where that's going. Okay, so let me ask you a question. This is a leading question. If you've been hacked, have you failed? Yeah, we got a yes. Anybody want to say no? There's a no. Great. So everybody's. So I tell you what. I think our bar for our jobs is set unrealistically high, and I think we keep hearing that if we've been hacked, we've all failed. The CISO should be fired, the CEO should be fired, and everybody should be fired. We should just go home and close up shop. I think that's just ridiculous. It's completely ridiculous. So, as defenders, there are three things. Like if you play enterprise defense, there's three things that you really care about. Three questions you absolutely have to ask and answer. There's only three that matter, in my opinion. Right? Number one, you control the situation. Controlling the situation is a little bit tricky in cyberspace. It's not like you can find somebody running amok, in your network or in your building. You want to get that? It's not me, is it? No. So if you control the situation, then you're not, that's not as bad as you think. So if you don't control the situation, you could be failing. There's an ING at the end of that. So because that's question number one. Right? Control the situation is important. You can lose it and regain it, but as long as you can get it back, that's an important thing to think about. But how do you control situations? Keep that back in your mind. In your network, how do you control the situation? Next big question is, have critical assets been exfiltrated? How appropriate. Have things that matter to your company, to your organization, to the future of your paycheck at current employer, have those left the building? That's a more fundamental question than that. We can sort of consider a critical asset. Anybody have that written down somewhere? Now, theoretically, it's probably not hard, right? Schematics for your latest prototype, company strategic plans, acquisition records, payroll, stuff like client lists, that's great. So at the theoretical level, we know what that sounds like. What does that actually look like? .xls files, .csv files, PNG files, DWG files, emails, chat logs, Perl scripts, people. What does it look like? People. They don't fit in the router very well. But what does this actually look like? So if critical assets have actually been exfiltrated, and somebody has told you, because you probably won't figure it out until the media calls you, that is, you are failing again with the ING. Alright. There's one more here. And this is kind of the kicker. Unfortunately, this is the hardest one to answer. Is the situation recoverable? Somebody tell me what that means. What does recoverable mean? Very good. Using the word in definition, excellent. So this is I've seen this mentioned on Twitter and in the news by people who clearly don't understand how the internet works. But it's basically one of these. Well, if somebody's stolen my files, I can log onto the server they stored them on and get them back. I would like to postulate that they do not understand how computers work. This is not a bar of gold you can simply take back from somebody. Right? This is a bar of gold that we've created the holotype replicator, and there's now a million of them. So if the situation isn't recoverable, then indeed you have failed. But now you have to answer 3 successive questions in a row. So let me give you some perspective. So for perspective, a website is a face thing. How many of you have ever experienced that? That I don't have to go, right? How many of you have malware on your systems? If everybody's not raising their hand, you're all lying. How many of you had the subject of a distributed denial of service attack? How many of you had those all happen this morning? Right? So these things, when these things happen to us, and we either lose connectivity momentarily, or we stop being able to process cards momentarily, or our website becomes, the poster for but bad things, right? We consider that, we're like, oh gosh, we've lost. Well, what if we put that up against things like stolen trade secrets? That's actually bad, right? Getting DDoS. Unless your business is, it's like an anonymous threat to DDoS the New York Stock Exchange. It's like, I do not think you understand how the internet works. You're DDoSing the website. Meanwhile, the trading is happening in that building over there. So knock yourself out. I can't get to the web page. Cool. Major political stand. But things like trade secrets do not leave the building, which is interesting. So defenders, you guys have to understand the difference. And I think that's where we're getting lost primarily today, is there's a lot of misunderstanding on the difference. It's all bad. There's not like 50 shades of bad in security, right? To make a really bad joke. Get it? Bad joke. So defenders, I think, must understand the difference. So as an attacker, who plays enterprise offense here? Okay. So as an attacker, but if you're a bad guy, you have absolutely only one question to answer. One. That's it. The only thing that matters. Anybody want to answer that question? Broader than that, just a little bit more broad than that. Anybody have a military background here? All right. They tell you to go blow up that building. What do you call that? There you go. Right? Have you achieved your objective? Here's a newsflash. Attackers don't just randomly attack things just to attack them. They used to, back when we were all in high school. And that's how you impress girls. Turns out nobody cared then, very few people care now. But have you achieved your objective? Somebody is probably paying you or bankrolling you in some other way, or providing you resources to go do something if you're a bad guy. I promise you it's not to take down the website of a competitor for 15 minutes. That's a distraction. It's a hand waving over here while your wallet out of your back pocket, right? It's a digital sleight of hand. So if there's only one question that bad guys need to answer, if that answer is no, they haven't won. They haven't succeeded. That means they have failed. Somebody's out there, right? That means they have failed. So that's interesting. You have to get 3 things wrong, they get only 1 that they have to get wrong. It's actually not so hard to be in security. The problem is, how many of you guys have been around since mid-90s when we did network security as a discipline, right? Anybody remember Acer Altos boxes and SCO Unix as the prevalent netware, and we use the network administration? Yeah, that was kind of fun in a way that makes you want to go home and cry. But back then, we couldn't, it was easy to point to where all your stuff was. It was on that giant 75-pound, 20 megabyte hard drive, right? That you spun down once a year because the odds are it would never spin back up again. But today, when somebody says, where are your corporate critical assets, you're like, they're in the cloud. There. How do you make sure you protect them? Firewalls. But you just told me they're in the cloud. Okay, right? Strategies need to adjust. So we have to do a bunch of things wrong, I think. Which is why this is my theory of why there aren't more breaches. Because we're just not, we're accidentally bad, we're just not on purpose bad. There's too many things you have to fail at consecutively for the bad guys to win. That's kind of a sad statement, is it not? So, I think if we take this knowledge, and we consider that maybe you believe me, we can shift the way we play the game. We can go from a short game, which is discrete incidents, and I'll explain that in a second, to what I consider like a long game, which is campaigns and objectives. You're all, I would bet dollars to this, most of you, if not all of you, are playing short game right now. Something pops up on your SIM dashboard, you go fix it. Close the incident, move on to the next one that's popped up on your dashboard, fix that one. When you're done with that one, you go to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and at some point you go home. Maybe. Come back to the office the next day, you do the same thing, rinse and repeat, until you get bored, move on, and do the same thing at the next job. Right? Sound about right? I'm sorry?
You don't have a SIM.
Unless you don't have a SIM, in which case this game is entirely different. You're not playing the short game in a can. But when we talk about long game, we look at long-term objectives. How do you begin to defend a company that's got distributed assets, that probably has enemies, not just like people who want to hack you for fun and profit, but actually enemies, right? Worse if you're working for the U.S. federal government, because we don't have any enemies. And so let's talk about playing defensive long game. I think what it is, and then we joke about it, and it's funny for like 30 seconds, and then we realize we suck at it, so we stop laughing, but fundamentals, right? There was a recent article somebody wrote about how companies that do ITIL are miserable to work for. You never want to work for a company that does anything ITIL related. But I will tell you right now that if the company you work for doesn't have any foundation in ITIL, run like hell. Especially if you're in security. Because odds are they won't be able to identify. Tell me there's jazz playing. Wow, I kind of feel like I should be snapping my fingers. So we get fundamentals wrong. Okay? If you're in security, you're trying to find adversaries, find real dangers, not just a malware that accidentally kicks over your nightstand at night and trying to rob you and wakes up the whole house, but the kind of stuff that you're not going to find otherwise, and you have to find anomalies for. When you can't identify what the legitimately good stuff is, this is a problem. This is why the first 36 hours of any incident, maybe 48, of any incident response is doing things like mapping your network, understanding what IP addresses do, locating firewalls and egress points, and understanding your systems. Not actually addressing the incident, mind you. The first 48 hours, we're trying to catch up to the bad guys as the external incident responders, right? So fundamentals, we have to get better at that. I know it's hard. I used to work for General Electric, right? We had a small network. Nobody could ever identify what any of the endpoints ever did, which is why security was impossible. But they got better over time. It takes effort, right? It's not focusing on the latest and greatest cool stuff. It's doing, can we get the stuff that is the fundamentals right? And if you look at your assets, what is the classification of that asset? What's the configuration of that asset? What are the last several changes that were made to that asset? The word 0 day appears exactly 0 times in this presentation. And when your adversaries come for you, and they will, and they do, it's very rare, I'm not the first person to say this, I won't be the last, it's very rare they will expend a zero-day vulnerability on it. Why? Because they'll ask your admin to plug the USB key in to print a document out for a meeting that doesn't exist in 20 minutes. That document will exploit a 27-year-old patch of vulnerability in PowerPoint, or your Office 2000 version. And of course, because your admin is on the same network as all your servers, game over. Tell me that wouldn't work in your company. Right? So knowing your battlefield is important. Knowing the organization we work for is important. I'm a hockey fan, so I call this one guy's advantage. Turns out we don't take advantage of this. Right? And defending the unknown is actually impossible. You can't. This is why the French in the military strategy, everybody makes fun of the whole Maginot Line. You guys heard of the Maginot Line, right? They figured, hey, Germany's over there, we're over here, all we're going to do is build these heavy fortifications. That'll get them. The Germans stood on the other side of that, and that's going to suck if we walk through that. Hey, look, Belgium. That's what your adversaries are doing. You have no idea that your back door is open. Meanwhile, we've got guns and turrets and sandbags all around the building. So things like actively mapping your protected space, things like collecting data and building baselines, things like threat intelligence. Except that, as my good friend Nico Montoya would say, y'all keep using that word. I don't think it means what you think it means. Right? No Princess Bride fans here? You haven't seen this movie long since it's one of the greatest movies of all time. It is inconceivable that you have not seen this movie. There's a whole gag that goes along with that. But, so, look, everybody, if you've been to RSA conference, you've been to Blackgate, you've been to these major conferences, it's the words threat and intelligence appear together on almost everybody's booth. On every marketing stick you'll get, on every presentation, every SIP vendor sells it, every shiny blinking box vendor sells it, every consultancy and service provider and aircraft carrier maker sells threat intelligence. It can't all be the same. If you ask 10 people, you get 12 answers. I know I did it. Right? Coming up with a definition for what threat intelligence is was one of the hardest things I've done in my career. It's like ordering a pizza for all of you and have to agree on ingredients. Somebody's going to be unhappy because, in fact, most people are going to be unhappy because you don't get what you want, but the idea is to get as close to what everybody doesn't hate as possible. So I think what we need to do is start intelligently incorporating externalities. Once you've figured out the fundamentals, once you know what your own network looks like, once you know what your company baseline is, once you know what your users do and what access they should have, let's start incorporating things from the outside world. But I warn you that more data isn't necessarily good, because we tend to think if I only have more data, guys, we don't have a data problem in security right now, I promise. In fact, we may have the exact opposite data problem that you think we do. We don't have a lack of data, we have entirely too much data. Because about 10 years ago, we were told that we don't have enough visibility, so that somebody came up with this log everything mentality, and we got it into some IT people's heads that logging everything is a good idea. We somehow managed to get them to buy off on that. And many of us work in companies where we do log everything. Terabytes and terabytes and terabytes a minute. This would be good. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying your ability to analyze it is pretty much non-existent. Right? If you get a bajillion alerts an hour, there's one of you, you're not going to be able to respond to them. It's bad. When you're on, as somebody said yesterday, when you're on the wrong side of the map, you're going to have a bad time. So what if I gave you 10,000 bad IP addresses? Like I give that to you for free. I can tell you 10,000 bad IP addresses at a given point in time. What would you do?
10.10.10.
What's that? So I think there's a bigger question. Well, first off, this isn't per week, per month, per day. This is probably every other hour or so you get this, right? So this is a rapid clip that you get these at. Where are you putting this? Don't say sin, don't say sin, don't say sin, don't say sin, right? Where are you putting all this data? That's a pretty big question. Actually, more fundamental than that is what the hell do you do with it? Because everybody wants some of that indirect intelligence goodness, right? If you can only just get some data feeds and understand what the bad guys are doing, boy, that will stop all.
Threat analytics.
Rock the algorithm. Threat analytics, all threat analytics. What do those words together mean?
No.
Right, exactly. Oh, sounded funny. Should come hijack your keynote.
Please do.
So what are you going to do with all this new data? I think that's actually a much harder question because we have these data problems, and I work with an organization. Sorry, I picked up Ebola from ACCIA a week ago. But the much more hard question here is, what are you going to do with this? And we're talking about mass quantities of data, and if I can take a second to say, everybody that has a SIM, raise your hand. Okay, those of you that don't, we can talk afterwards, but it is 2015, right? No. So the problem is, computers are sort of finite, right? We have a finite amount of memory, finite amount of disk storage space. CPU can do only so much in so much time, unless you invented space-time travel in space, then you kind of fun. Let's try that someday. But if you've got a terabyte of data coming into your SIM every hour, let's say, rounding down, you'd like to ultimately be able to analyze all that data, right? So to be able to analyze it, you have to store it someplace, data structures that are quickly crunchable, right? So far with me? So what does that expand out to? So let me approach the other side of this question then. What's the window of time most attackers operate in? Minutes, hours, days,
Years.
months, okay. So if you're a pen tester and you want to really get into a company stealthily, you don't launch you don't map their entire network and then start launching attacks at them, right? So they'll see you. Right? Low and slow. Find things that nobody looks at, send an attack, wait, go have lunch, watch some TV, come back, try it again. So to be unseen, right? Anybody seen 25,000 Hours, something completely different? How not to be seen? No? Great sketch. Hilarious. Says the shot of Japanese will never be able to unsee. But you have to be invisible. In order to be invisible, you extend your time window of your attack. This actually works against the data set you're all collecting. Because if we're talking about months, a terabyte an hour times a month, how many of you guys can store that in RAM right now on your SIM? No? Nobody? Really? Yeah, I'm disappointed. You and your Amazon clouds. So what actually happens is that your security tools become your adversary. Forget playing against the bad guys, your tools become your bad guys. What I mean by that is, how many alerts do you actually receive? Right? So, and per day. Here's a fun question. I ask this all the time in these types of circles. And I'm not going to ask you guys because y'all seem like a nice group of people, but the general answer is somewhere north of 10,000 alerts a day. Right? Sounds about right. That's cool. If you want to work that out to how long it would take then, if you manage to process 10,000 alerts in a 24-hour period, how much time do you have to be good with that? 10,000 divided by 24 hours? Too many. That's good math right there. As the American education system that works most. So the answer is too damn many. So to go through this, receive the issue, triage it, make a decision, move on to the next one, takes time. And you want to guess at how many average, and this is at least 3 to 4 years old, so maybe a little bit dated, probably not that much. How many alerts an analyst, a mid-level analyst can process per shift? 5? eight-hour shift. It's fine. For generic, it's just kill it with fire, right? It's a tier 1 automated response. All that 80% should be taken out, and in fact, I would say that 80% should never actually make it to your network to begin with. If it lands by accident, it should be taken out by your layer defenses, by your automation, right? Your email gateway. Your email gateway is good. It not only filters out spam, but it does URL scrubbing, it does attachment scrubbing, right? So that you can't, when you get a link, you can't just verify that it's not going to something that's known malware. You should never click on known bad things in your organization ever. Your system should disallow that. In fact, there should be a hand that comes out of the screen, slaps you upside the head, and says, "This is bad. Don't do it." Right? So this is an automated response. Do not expend human time on this. If it's not fixable by tech, 25-pound sled works just fine. Or re-image it. Whatever works better. Although re-imaging at the rate that some of us want to do this generally makes your enterprise staff pretty unhappy. If twice a day they get a new computer, so that points back to we're doing something wrong, right? We should be spending near zero human time on generic threats. We really should. Targeted. All right, this is the tier 2 focus response. Anybody know who this is from? Thank you. That was quick. You know your movies. For type 2, contain, analyze, and potentially destroy. Contain the threat, because if you need to figure out what it is, what its intent is, whether it goes into the generic or the persistent bucket, analyze it, understand its intentions, understand its origins, understand its capabilities. Right? So that's why we have intelligence. And then destroy it. Because odds are, if it's pops up, it's kind of cool. If it's generic, nuke it. If it's persistent stuff that could cause you some serious heartache, then we need some more time on it, right? But expect minimal time here, but not zero. 15 minutes per machine tops. Your tools and your intelligence and your data and your analysis, before you even get to it, should give you enough data that you can make in 15 minutes, you can make a decision on whether this is worth pursuing or pushing the big red panic button. No more than 15 minutes. Especially if you have more than 1,000 people. Because generally your IR, once your level of IR people to staff is over 1,000, 10,000 to 1, these numbers do not scale the way you think they do. Right? We have problems. Which means you have next to no time to respond. Your persistent attack category is a focus tier 3 response. This is the game of chess we play. Contain it, analyze it, remove it, and recover it. You don't nuke these. You know why? Come on, somebody tell me what the answer is here.
Too much good data.
Yes. Yes, but what's the next after that? Preserving evidence. Anyone? Nothing says, oh crap, not accidentally, like by policy, nuking a bunch of machines and an FBI shows up and says, hey, you were part of a big, fraud thing. We have these machines, you're like, oh, I just nuked that. Because that doesn't look bad. Right? And you want to recover at the end of this. Part of recovery is what these guys have been saying. Learn your lesson. What should you do differently as a result of this incident? Closed loop incident response. We don't do that today. I'm trying to figure out why. In this category, we spend the time that is necessary to solve the problem. I try not to let people time box this, because if you do, tell them. Because if you do, you get to a point where like, okay, I can't spend any more time on this, so you're not as important. That's kind of rough, right? How do you tell the difference between those two categories? Okay, this is where threat intelligence actually starts to make sense. You realize it's toward the back of my presentation. We've talked about everything else that we should have been doing well for the last 15 years. Now we actually get to applications of intelligence. Right? Once we've understood our home, once we understood how things function, atomic indicators need context. You get a random, massive feed of bad IP addresses. Who cares? A good friend of mine, who's no longer with us, used to say, one of his biggest anecdotes used to be that his group would produce a blacklist of bad IP addresses. And they would do it by fidelity, how certain are you that this is a bad IP address, and severity, how bad is the stuff the thing is doing. You know those at the top of almost every single one of those lists, what companies at the top of that list? Exactly, Google. I dare you to block your IP range. See what happens, right? The goal is intelligent prioritization. Now we get to it. The goal that you're trying to do is intelligently prioritize all the things that are shouting at you every day. All the bad things going on in your network, all the bad user behavior. You need to be able to intelligently prioritize. So take opportunistic malware against the adversary. Right? Feeding intelligence into a process. This is something we developed. This is our OODA loop, if you will. Acquisition and secondary development, triage, collaboration and enrichment, distribution, execution, feedback, strategy, governance, and measurement. 11 steps. This is how a world-class organization does for intelligence. I've had this vetted through military, large organizations, small organizations, 70 some odd different companies. I'll get you the slides if you want, and they can possibly want to take pictures of them. But this is how a world-class organization does it. Now, this is a level 5. So there are 5 levels of maturity: aware, reactive, adaptive, purposeful, and strategic. This is how strategic does it. You want to know how aware does it? Oh, look, dashboard works. Maybe. They haven't said it. But I've looked at what's interesting here is, I think the thing that I want to leave you guys with is, as you stare at this, is as you look at arrows in and arrows out, you can't have more mature input going into a lower, you can't have higher maturity going into lower maturity. Does that make sense? A really good data acquisition process means you have a ton of really good data going into an immature triage process means you have no idea what to do with it. Or a really good data acquisition process, a really good triage process that just gets sent out in PDFs to people in your company. What a horrific waste of really smart people's time. A lot of companies do this. Don't be that guy or that gal. Right? So let's start with external indicators. We initialize, right? We take data that's internal and external. We bring it into our triage process. There's also this, see if this pointer works. Technology. So the secondary development. Secondary development is, if you've ever done this, you basically get a bad IP address, go seek that IP address out of your network, realize it's doing something bad, analyze it, realize there's a process running on it that shouldn't be there. Use that as your secondary indicator. Take that indicator and go, I wonder if any other machines are running this process but aren't doing this other activity yet. You realize 4 other machines on your network, only 4, have this weird process that you can't find anything else about. So what's up here belong here. But they aren't doing anything bad yet. Let's go ahead and quarantine these, because these could be like sleeping temporarily after they've been infected. Weird. Right? There's your secondary development of indicators. Triage, that collaboration and enrichment. Enrichment means I need more data. I got an IP address. Who does it belong to? What did it do in the last 24 to 48 hours? Does it belong to China, Russia? What does my magic 8-ball attribution say? Right? Collaboration is both internal and external, inside your company. This is where we can go ask people, hey, does anybody know who owns this IP address? What's on it? Why is it connecting to China and sending 3 terabytes a day? When the answer to that question is, because we have a partner there we're sending large data files to, that's not an incident. Distribution is important, because after you've taken data and refined it, made it actual information, intelligence, it has to be distributed in the right way, at the right time, to the right people or tools to make sense. It has then be executed, actioned upon. I hope that's obvious, but not always. And then you provide feedback all the way along the chain, right? From that, you build strategy. Are you doing the right things for the company you're a part of? Do you need to be a level 5, or are you perfectly happy at a level 2? You take that in governance, meaning, am I doing these things that my strategy says reasonably well? Am I comfortable with the level of risk I'm attaining? And then measurement, because if you can't measure it, don't do it, right? KPIs or it didn't happen. How well are we doing this? Are we catching more incidents? Are we reducing the dwell time on our systems by bad guess? Right, so refinement, distribution, execution, and then we ask, can I learn from this incident? What new thing that comes out of this? What's my takeaway? If the answer is nothing and you move on to the next incident, you're doing it wrong. Can you improve as a result of the incident? Can you do something better? Do you realize now that clearly you need a baseline on a particular network that's always infected with something? Why is that? Even if it's just one particular piece of your network, you can start segmenting things. You can say, this group of people here that's seemingly random, if I look at Active Directory, they're all part of the same group. It's called R&D, I wonder what they do. Why are they all getting infected? That's weird. Right? Now let's figure out how to win. And winning is three goals. Raising the cost of the adversary. I get it. Most of the real adversaries are never going to outprice. Okay? But you can annoy the hell out of them. You can keep raising their costs until you are no longer a viable target. Now, sometimes they'll keep beating you. But this is just one goal, right? I don't need to tell you to make sure that they can't spend to your level. If it's you versus China, they have a couple more pennies than you do. But raise the cost of the adversary. Don't make them spend a 0 day to get into your organization, because that actually takes effort. Connecting to a site where an application's got hard-coding credentials, admin, and password, not difficult. If you fail your pen test in the first 15 minutes, your adversaries will not spend 0 days on you, I promise. Frustrate the adversary. Let them, if they land on your network successfully, kick them out. They land again, kick them out again. Rinse and repeat as necessary. Right? This may seem like a never-ending game. That's because it is. This is the industry, this is the job we play in. This is what real life is like. We're not actually going to, prevent somebody from never coming back. Deterrence, I think, is a complete myth people sell us to make us feel better about ourselves. Frustrating the adversary is a fantastic thing. There's nothing better than a frustrated attacker. You know why? They screw up. They get mad. I'll show you. Really? Do it. Show me something I've never seen before. I'd love for you to do that. You know why? Because that'll trip the sensor somewhere. Goal number 3 is keep that from achieving the objective. You've got a military background, so this should be something that's absolutely fundamental to your core. But you have to know what your adversary's objective is and where that exists in your network or in your organization to keep A from happening to B. If your adversary's goal is to steal your quarterly earnings report before your CEO goes on CNBC to talk about it, you only have to keep it safe until your CEO starts talking on CNBC. At that point, when that person starts talking and talks about earnings, because it's been released, it's now public data. Here, I'll hand it to you. Guess what, adversary? You suck. You lost. I won. It's not always that plain and simple, but it's a pretty good example of it. So we need to disrupt the effort to achieve objectives. That's it. It's a disruption game, I think. And a repeat is necessary. And this, folks, I think is what real security really is about. It's not, we're not 007. We just need to keep frustrating them, annoying them, and keep them from getting the things that make our companies tick and us have the ability to collect the paycheck. Right? If you have kids, if you have family, the idea is to have a safer world. We are all becoming more connected. The idea of being able to create confidence in that more connected world is what we should all be striving for. That's what real security is about. So that's it. If anyone wants to reach me or my team, like I said, we've got the group that's here next week on Insider Threat. Stop by up here, give me a card, I'll give you data, how to get there, I'll get you an invite. Solutions.research.com if anyone wants to reach our group, or just my first name, last name, .com if you want to reach me. I'm here for another hour or so if anyone wants to ask questions. Nobody's throwing anything at me, so I'm assuming nobody buy any of this series yet. So thank you so much, guys. Hope you learned something.